This conference will now be recorded.
That steers the microbial ecology in the direction we'd like it to go. So vault 1, there you have it. All right, so next on our list of cheeses to taste is Winnemere. And Winnemere, I kind of describe as like the soul, the philosophical heart of what we're trying to do at Jasper Hill. We're pushing boundaries in all kinds of different ways, but creating a cheese that is really an expression of the landscape. We've got spruce cambium, which we cut. It's a living part of spruce trees, which we cut off our farm. And they're harvested, you know, the cambium is harvested all summer long. We dry those strips, put them up, and then boil them and put them on the outside of the cheese. We boil them to soften them up because they're, it's like spaghetti, it's like stiff and brittle, and to sanitize them. So the spruce band creates a girdle that keeps the cheese from spreading. This cheese is made with very little starter culture. There's almost no added cultures in this cheese. It really is an expression of the milk and the farming system that produces that milk. The microbial ecology of raw milk is the sum of the practices on a farm. And really, when we make a raw milk cheese, what we're trying to do is really capture the diversity of the microbial diversity of our landscape and of the practices in our animal management on the farm, and sum it up in a sense in the form of a cheese. Zoe, you wanna take us through a tasting there?
Sure, yeah. So I am so pleased to be sitting here with my own Winnemere.
What we ended up doing, it was slightly firmer than normal, but it's still not really firm. So we actually cut them in we were able to cut them in wedges. They're stuck to the plate, of course, at this point. But so show this is the only way we sell the cheese, is the way you're displaying it now.
In the whole wheel, which is really the right way. You know, you should be able to have this drama at home where you slice back the top. So you can see I kind of took a little wedge out of my cheese, filleted the rind off, just like you would if you've ever filleted a fish. And then if you keep that little corner rind, when you're done, you can kind of stick that back on the top, pop it in a Ziploc bag or a Tupperware container and save it for another day. I like to describe the taste of this cheese as bacon pudding. It has this puddingy texture, and the spruce bark wrapper on the outside, you guys can see there, gives it that really woodsy taste. And the rind, the washed rind cheese, so it's also a soft ripened cheese, it's obviously just like a bloomy rind cheese, but instead of the white fluffy rind, it has, it's literally washed during aging, and we get sticky orange culture. That's kind of, this side of the cheese has the best orange culture that you can see. And that washed rind is going to give you hammy, meaty, sort of smoky flavors. And that hammy, smoky effect, along with the spruce bark, is how it gets the bacon pudding moniker. So enjoy that and pick up a whole wheel of Winnemere, or Harbison is also a spruce bark wrapped dipping cheese. Any cheese you eat with a spoon, it's right up my alley.
Can you? We had a customer ask, their personal favorite is Harbison. So what are the differences between the two, and why we chose Winnemere today, just from a standpoint of the storytelling? You know, why winning? Why this is one of the most special cheeses on the planet?
All right, I'll answer the what's the difference first, and then I'll let Mateo answer why we make it in the wintertime. So they're both soft ripened cheeses, Harbison and Winnemere. I mentioned Winnemere has a washed rind, Harbison has a bloomy rind, so two different affinage styles. Harbison is a pasteurized cheese. We sell it before the federal ruling of 60 days of aging, so we want to get it out into the supply chain on a truck, heading to Texas. Give Antonelli's a lot of time to place it with one of you folks. And Windermere, on the other hand, because it's a raw milk cheese, we have to wait 60 days before we can sell it. And at 60 days, it's like very close to ripe. So it has a shorter time in the supply chain, and it tends to stay either locally or we creatively get it to specialty markets where people know how to sell it right in time. So you guys are lucky to have access to it as far away as you are from the farm. So the difference is pasteurized versus Harbison pasteurized, Windermere raw, Harbison bloomy rind, Windermere washed rind, and then Windermere is only made in the winter time. And I'll let Mateo tell you why.
So cows make milk every day of the year, and the market for artisan cheese is seasonal. And we would bump into a situation where everybody wanted constant bliss, and they wanted to buy all kinds of Bailey Hayes and Blue coming up into the holidays. And then in January, it was pretty tough to get people to buy cheese. And we've got, everybody coming off the holidays, credit card debt, New Year's resolutions, diets, and all this like disruptive, behaviors for an artisan cheesemaker who's making cheese 7 days a week, 365 days a year, Sunday, birthdays, Christmas. We make cheese every day of the year. And Windermere was our approach to training our market to spend some money in January. So on the one hand, there are these traditional cheeses that are made only with when the cows are in the barn eating hay, and that produces a really rich milk, which is great for making these styles of cheese. The winter milk and summer milk are actually pretty different. We took the opportunity to try and create a cheese that everybody would look forward to in January, which is normally when we release our first batches of Windermere. Should we move on to Landaf? So Landaf.
Before you do, Mateo, I've got the video to share.
Oh, yeah. Show us some video.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I'll go away so you can do that. Yeah. All right. So Vault 6 is where all our wash rind cheeses. What we're looking at here is a cheese called Eligo. It's a goat cow blend. We'll talk about that. We've got Willoughby, which is made at the Food Venture Center, another cheese making facility that we operate. It's a little washed rind, like Alsatian monster. This is a cheese made by Landaf Creamery. It's called Kinsman Ridge. It's a delicious tome style, and we've got Oma from the Von Trapp farmstead. And then Windermere is what you're looking at. So what all these cheeses have in common is they're washed with some kind of a brine, right? Salt brine, or with beer or cider or liquor. And there's a couple of things that are going on in Vault 6. And that is there's almost no air exchange or air movement. It is cool and still. It's cool and still, and we are trying to create the conditions that select for yeast and bacteria. So by washing the rinds, we're disturbing any mold that might be growing there. There's a little to no air exchange, so we're not creating the conditions that would favor the penicilliums we saw growing on Moses Sleeper or Harbison, for instance. And we're steering the ecology in a completely different direction. We're not adding any cultures, any ripening cultures to Windermere. It's what's there is being selected for and is being expressed. It's being carried with the flora and the raw milk, and it's in the environment, right? So This is a process that selects for these yeast and bacteria, which are metabolizing the lactic acid that's produced during cheese making and raising the pH on the rind. And the way that these cheeses ripen is actually through osmotic pressure. As that acidity is consumed by yeast on the rind, there's osmotic pressure that's created, and acidity in the core of the cheese migrates towards the rind, and that's really what starts to modify the texture and create that amazing, like, spoonable consistency. So Winnemere, we've got a couple of questions here. What is the process of washing the rind? So we've got all those racks of cheese. We set them up on a table like this one, and people stand on either side, and you've got a brush that you hold in your hand, and you pick each wheel up and brush it with you've got a little container of brine, so wash, turn, and that happens in the case of Winnemere about 30 times over the course of 2 months. So it's incredibly labor intensive. And the name Winnemere is part of the lakeshore on Caspian Lake, where my great granddad bought a fishing shack almost 100 years ago. So in 1923, we're about to come up on 100 summers. It's the happy place of our collective family childhood. All right.
And I want to say, I think from a cheesemonger perspective, Winnemere is one of those cheeses as a cheesemonger that you search out. This is when you have the opportunity to have a wheel of this in your refrigerator, you make it happen. Whatever it takes, you get it, because this is the kind of cheese we put out at our staff holiday parties, because that's what they want, is this sexy, delicious, amazing flavor profile that you can only really get when you pair all of these aspects together. The bark, I mean, Harbison is also another bark wrap cheese that they make with the white malt, but this Winnemere, there's something special about it, which is why it wins awards, which is why it's so ridiculous. One of your team members at the time when you guys won Best of Show for this cheese drove all the way from Greensboro, Vermont to Madison, Wisconsin with whatever, there was only like 15 wheels left in the world at that moment. This was in July, so they were made out of season just for the American Cheese Society competition, and it won best in the entire country. And I think he had to actually go and take it from one of the distributors that you sold it to,
yes,
and pick it up at like 11 o'clock at night, drive through the night to get it to the actual award ceremony in time to allow us cheesemongers to taste it. Just amazing.
That was pretty exciting. Winning Best in Show in Madison, Wisconsin. That's like our town now. We are that town now.
Do you say that out loud when you're there, or you just keep it to yourself?
Yes. No.
Awesome. That's great.
How long would a Winnemere stay fresh in the refrigerator? What would you say? So
It's got a enjoy by date on every wheel, and I like it about a week out from the enjoy by. When you start getting within a couple days of that enjoy by, which is usually pretty accurate depending on the batch, it's going to get more intensely smoky, a little bit more earthy. You might get some ammonia coming out of it. So it's no hard rule. Some batches are good past that date, but our sensory team is pretty good at choosing a date that most people are going to like it up until. So keep an eye on that, and don't try to push it too far past.
all right, Landaff. Landaff is a great story because it gets to part of our mission as a company, which is to lower the barriers to entry for other producers in our neighborhood. Landaf is like a Caerphilly style cheese made by Doug and Deb Herb. And they milk 90 Holstein cows across the river in Landaf, New Hampshire. And believe it or not, that's not that far from here. And they approached us about, participating in this project before we had finished construction of the cellars. Caerphilly style cheese is a Welsh, it's like a Welsh cheddar. It's a slightly higher moisture cheddar type cheese. So Wales and Somerset are connected, and I connected Doug Herb with cheesemakers in the UK. My background in cheese is through Neal's Yard Dairy. I had friends in Britain who were producing this style of cheese, and I set Doug up with a visit for about a month, and he went and made cheese in Somerset with a Caerphilly producer, and came back and started making this raw milk cheese. We consider it a really important part of our collection. It is the most Moorish, which is very Englishism, cheese. From what I watch is like the rate at which different cheeses disappear on a board, and it's very accessible. It's a raw milk cheese, so it has like a complexity of flavor that will just like keep whispering to you over time. And I think it's possibly the most, like pound for pound, the most consumed cheese in my household. And the herbs are salt of the earth, real people, and exactly the kind of farmers and producers that we want to support. So it's not going to be a best in show, like show-stopping cheese. It's subtle, it's approachable, it melts really well, it holds its flavor when you cook with it. I love this cheese. So do you wanna taste it with everybody?
Yeah, well, and I was going to say that Zoe, when we got to visit, Zoe made us a ridiculous mac and cheese with this as the foundation. But you said Doug and Deb Herb they're just salt of the earth people. And what I thought was so amazing is when we got to visit there, they built a viewing room into the cheese make room, put a glass window up, had some chairs out, and they built that so their grandkids could watch. So it's really just a kind of a family experience. And they were just some of the nicest human beings in the world, no pretension. They have some of the best milk in the country. They were winning awards for their animals. And then they just decided to make great cheese. And this has always been in our case. One of the challenges from a cheesemonger perspective is when it's cold, it doesn't show up as well. A lot of the English style cheeses don't show up as well when you're sampling across the counter. But when it's at room temperature like this bite right now is unbelievably outstanding.
And it'll be whispering to you like way down the road, you know what I mean? You'll be like, oh, what's that? Oh, hi, Landaf. Still whispering in my ear. I love this cheese.
Awesome. So Landaf is this shape so that Welsh coal miners could hold it like this with their sooty fingers and just eat it for lunch like an apple. So it's not meant to be a precious, fancy cheese. It's meant to be a big hunk on your plate that's part of your meal. I love that about it is, as my brother says, it's the cheese he can get the most of in his mouth at one time, which I think is a good thing for him. But it's, Mateo, I saw a question that what was the style again? So I would put Landaf in the British territorial style. So cheddar is the most common British territorial style, the same way that brie is the most common bloomy rind. So it is in the same family tree as cheddar, but made in a different region. And Caerphilly is the cheese specifically that Doug went and learned how to to do that British territorial style milled curd cheese. So this British territorial style is known for its bright flavors, crumbly texture, utilitarian use, like eat it as a meal. This particular wedge of Landaff, which was made in October, it's pretty old for us. It is wicked brown buttery. I'm getting notes of Werther's, like butterscotch Werther's. It is the most caramely and interesting chunk of Landaff I've had in a long time. Younger wheels, more typical wheels, I would get more buttermilk, rosemary, herbaceous notes. But this one in particular, and every so often you'll get a really special wheel of Landaff that's like mashed potatoes, brown butter, and like, or buttered noodles, like starchy, cheesy, rich, delicious. So I'm into this wedge. It's great. All right, so why don't we talk about, we're going to get into farming and talk about how our business developed. I'm going to share my screen, and once we built the Cellars, we ended up with more space than we needed. So bringing in cheeses like Landaff was one thing that we did, but we also built a second creamery and took on a second herd of cows. So I'm going to let Mateo narrate, and I'm going to show you a couple images here.
All right, so, you know, our approach is to take as many acres in our neighborhood and plug it into the market that we're building. So if you think about Austin, Texas, and all the cash that's accumulated in the economy there, you know, well, we're interested in that. We're an exporter, right? What we're doing is really, we're building a pipeline to markets where there's disposable income and putting high value products into that pipeline and sucking cash out and redistributing it to producers like Tom Hill right there. I don't know if you can see Zoe's mouse, but he's our next door neighbor. He milks 40 cows, and his family has been here since the 1780s. It's an incredible man. When we started, he would drop his milking units and come help us figure out whatever issues we were having. In 2014, we bought Andersonville Farm, which where we milk about 180 cows and manage about 1,000 acres of pasture land and hay ground. And you know, if you think about cheese as like an economic multiplier, you know, something that can concentrate value and that can deliver resources to our community, you know, that's how we think about cheese. That, you know, we didn't start Jasper Hill as like, let's make this like something special and esoteric. What we were trying to do was develop the economic mechanisms to support our working landscape. And Andersonville Farm was an important hill farm in the next town over from us. And we had been purchasing some milk. So now our model, we're making up as we go. We're buying cheese from cheese makers that can capture some value on the farm, and you know, simplifying the business model for them so they don't have to carry the cost of inventory or the labor and facilities to ripen their cheese or do all the marketing, sales, and distribution. But we're also buying milk from our neighbors and really trying to you know, plug as many acres into the market as that we're building. So, you know, at this point, there's, oh boy, about 800 cows worth of production that are being supported by the Cellars. We also built a hay drying facility. So what we're looking at here is technology that was developed in Reggio Emilia, right? Every cheese making region has its approach to drying hay. Most dairy has migrated towards silage in our area. 30 years ago, everybody made dry hay. Now, almost nobody does, but dry hay is a critical ingredient in the production of raw milk cheese because the microbial ecology of dry hay is totally different than the microbial ecology of silage. And we've been able to really elevate the quality of our raw milk, the diversity of the microflora, and while excluding pathogens by really building our business on a foundation of dry hay. So this facility we built in 2015. It's it's the first one and only one in the U.S. that I know of, and we use it to make about 2,500 tons of dry hay. We're able to pick the hay up and cheat the weather windows. We use the sun as much as possible, but we're able to harvest grass at like peak quality and put in a bale and then blow air through it in order to kind of finish the drying process. And it's been an incredible kind of advancement, both in the impact on the number of acres that we're able to pull in and on the quality of feed that we have for our cows. All right.
As a layman, I'll just jump in and say that silage is fermented hay, and in our wet climate, it's way easier to wrap up the bales of hay in that white plastic wrap and have it ferment, which preserves nutrients for the cows, it's probiotic, but as Mateo said, the microbial profile of that feed can really mess up your cheese. So if we don't have, low relative humidity and lots of sunshine like we don't in Vermont, this hay dryer is a way to make sure we can keep quality.
In England, they have a problem that they don't have enough sunshine to dry hay. So most of their styles of cheese lend themselves towards high acid and high salt content because of the food is fermented that the cows eat, and then they ferment the milk once it comes out. So in order to avoid
be not fooled, John Antonelli. Be not fooled. Like 40, 50 years ago, nobody made silage. Silage is actually a pretty new technology, and it's the expediency of it is undeniable. The economics of silage is undeniable, but for generations, until this past generation, British farmers made lots of dry hay. And I'll tell you that they get half the rainfall in Northumberland and Northern England as we do here in Vermont. So I sorry to interrupt.
I love it. I always learn stuff from you. I love it.
Yeah.
We all share.
I learned that when I was over there this past time. But once the farm transitions to silage, it's almost impossible for a farm to go back. Farms are built around practices, and the feeding practice is fundamental. So when we changed the way we fed our cows at Andersonville Farm, it was like a massive, massive ordeal. All right. So that kind of leads us into,
Mateo, I've got that short video of land app. I can just at least show them what the inside of the cave looks like.
Yeah.
I'll share my screen real quick. We don't necessarily have to play the whole video, but you can see what the vault looks like. Vault number 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's cool too, because you've got land app in the front on these carts that we pull out into the aisle to work and turn on. It's like a library stack, and then we slide it back in. And then down at the other end of the vault, we've got Alpha Tolman and a cheese called Highlander, which is the next cheese we're going to taste. And so both Alpha Tolman and Highlander are ripened in the same way. They start their life out in vault 2 here. It's about 14 to 15 degrees centigrade. So like, what is that? 60, 61. It's a little warmer. And what we're doing here also is kind of giving the young cheese a jump start. So what we've got in Vault 2 is like, young Alpha Tolman and Highlander. That's Highlander right there. It's a little thinner, and Alpha Tolman. So, all right. So you want to go back to that that other slide with some goats. We'll talk about goats and what we're getting into now. We partnered with a couple who approached us just a little over 2 years ago. Ryan Andrus and his wife Annie were milking goats for Cypress Grove in Humboldt, California, and there's been a lot of consolidation happening in the cheese industry, and big multinationals are coming in and purchasing like mature or artisan cheese businesses, or there's a generation of cheese businesses that were started in the 80s that have all transitioned in the last few years. And it's the Swiss and the French primarily who are making big moves in essentially buying up our market in the US, which for the last 20 years has been the fastest growing market, one of the only markets in the world that's like expanding. And that's obviously stopped pretty hard the last few weeks. They moved out and we partnered with them. So Jasper Hill and Ryan Andrus and Annie Rowden are 50-50 partners in this farm, Bridgman Hill Farm, which was a farm that we bought through a bankruptcy process, and found a couple who were interested in making a move and kind of attaching themselves to like what we're up to here. And they're coming from the small ruminant world. So we ended up, Andy and I bought a farm, and we contributed it to a new company called Richmond Hill Farm. We're milking 300 goats there now. And we also bought the goats and a bottling business called Oak Knoll Dairy. Oak Knoll founders, an older couple, bred an incredible herd of disease-free goats and started a bottled milk brand called Oak Knoll. So we bought the whole business. They retired, George and Karen retired, and the herd of goats moved up to Hardwick, Vermont, which is adjacent to Greensboro, onto this farm that we purchased the previous year and built a barn, a bottling plant, and a house. So it's been a kind of busy year. But one of the way the business works is we put most of the milk into bottles at this point, about probably 80%, and then we balance the bottle business by making cheese. And so this past year we developed 3 distinctive cheeses. Eligo, which is a washed rind brick. We saw it in Vault 2, ripening with the washed rind cheeses. Bridgman Blue, which is a 50-50 goat cow raw milk cheese, and Highlander, which is what we're going to taste here. So this cheese is 50% raw cow's milk from Andersonville Farm, and 50% raw goat's milk from Bridgman Hill. And when we make this cheese, it's different than Alpha Tolman. We actually rinse the curd a little bit in the vat, and I love this cheese. This cheese, I think we're going to see a lot of incredible results as we start to roll this cheese out. So this is one of the first batches that we've actually started to market. So do you want to give us a tasting? What we just saw there was Vault 3, where this cheese ripens.
All right. So this is Highlander. I am just swooning over it. Whenever the sales team hears about a new cheese under development, we're like, oh man, here we go. A 2.5-year process where there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. We don't know how saleable it's going to be. Right out of the gates, Highlander was just so delicious and has been such a boon for my own kitchen. So this cheese, as Mateo mentioned, rinsing the curd, you're basically washing away some of the whey that's actively producing acidity, and then you're ending up with a sweeter cheese with a smoother texture. So this recipe is designed for melting. And it was based on the recipe for, if you've ever seen those cheeses that you heat up under an iron in the fire and then scrape it onto potatoes with salami and pickles. This cheese would be perfect for that. So as we mentioned, it's half goat, half cow. I think it brings the best of both worlds. Cow's milk is really rich and buttery. Goat's milk is sort of peppery and really interesting aromatics and flavors. And you get both of this cheese. You get the body of the curd and the richness from the cow's milk, and then you get the nuance of aroma from the goat. This batch that I'm having is particularly sweet because it's such a new cheese. We ourselves haven't tasted it much older than 3 or 4 months. This batch is also from October. So this is probably the oldest I've ever tasted the cheese, and I'm just like giddy about it. It is just so delicious, really caramely. You got the white pepper note from the goat and that richness from the cow's milk cheese. It is as good to snack on as it is to cook with. I'm pumped about it.
So, Megan asked why it's called Highlander.
Well, around here, a lot of landmarks are called the Highlands. The Northeast Kingdom is also known as the Highlands, kind of before that term was coined by the governor. So we have the Highland Center for the Arts as our performing arts center nearby, the Highland Lodge. Highlander Road runs right through Greensboro. So it's another taste of place name.
And it's also totally linked to, the Scottish migrants who colonized this little corner of the world. We are surrounded by Scots who have been here since the clearances. So that's the other part.
Our Ayrshire cows are of Scottish descent too.
We had another quick question. How do we cook with Highlander?
Any recipe that would call for Gruyere, you could totally, up the ante and add Highlander. So anything that would require a melting cheese, it's going to be perfect for Highlander. So I have gotten leftover roasted potatoes, put it in a little cast iron skillet, put a slice of Highlander over the top. Maybe if you have any leftover bacon from breakfast, stick that in there. And that's as simple as it gets. Also, if you subscribe to her newsletter, Mateo's wife, Angie, just published her scalloped potato recipe. This cheese would be amazing with that. So feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to forward that recipe along.
That sounds outstanding. It is 7 o'clock. The event was supposed to end at 7. We do have 2 more cheeses to taste, and I will never cut off cheesemakers because they're amazing and they are the hardest working people I've ever met. But if for some reason you have to leave because you've been away from your couch too long and you want to get back to it, we can share this video with you after the fact and you can finish your cheeses. Then just email Kendall or I, and we will get you a link. It takes about 24 hours for the recording to sync up, but I can get that for you. So yeah, I imagine most of you don't have, some of you are already on the couch. That's great. Fantastic. I will kick it back over to these amazing 2 people to finish up. I'll go move to the next cheese, Cabot Cloth Bound. This is amazing.
All right. So Cabot Cloth Bound is what we're looking at in the background here. We've got Cabot Cloth Bound in 2 vaults, vault 4 and 5. And I normally start my tour, if I'm giving a tour in the cellars, here, because this cheese is kind of fundamental to the business as a whole. Cabot Cloth Bound carries a lot of weight and a lot of water around here. I'd call it like the donkey of the business because it's on the back of Cabot Clothbound that we built almost everything else. We were able to borrow the money to build this crazy building because of the contract that we had with Cabot Creamery and that Best in Show award back in 2006. So I always want to honor the co-op. When we started here, you know, our farm had been shipping to Cabot Creamery for generations before you know, it went out and we bought it 20 years later. And you know, this cheese was developed as a collaboration. They thought maybe we should make the cheese, and they were going to private label it. But we've really flipped that around and had, you know, worked with May Leach and Marcel Gravel, who are both retired from Cabot at this point, to develop this cheese. And they made the cheese, we ripened it. They paid us $10 a wheel per month to age the cheese. And after 18 months of R&D, we had like 10,000 pounds of cheese in our little cellar across the road. And they you know, R&D, cheese was great, picked it up and took it to a warehouse and then tried to sell it. And it turns out that this is back in the, you know, early 2000s. Their customers didn't understand the cheese. Their salespeople didn't understand the cheese, and our customers were a bunch of snobs that wouldn't buy cheese from Cabot. And so that cheese came back, called them up after a few months because we were missing the income. We were still in startup mode, and we started selling this cheese to our customers, and it was just like a smash hit from the beginning. You know, it really is transformative to our business because up until that point, we were a FedEx-based business. And we used to ship about 250 customers direct at the time. And, you know, there's just like walls of styrofoam and ice packs and the dropkick FedEx delivery method. And Cabot Clothbound changed our company in that it allowed us to build a layer of, to build a pallet and, you know, transition to cold chain logistics and scale, right? So there's cash flow and there's more importantly weight, which allowed us to build the rest of the business. All right, so let's taste the cheese because, you know, this is cheese with a purpose. It's cheese with a mission. When you buy a chunk of Cabot Clothbound, you make a lot of things happen, not just for us, but for other producers in the area. And it helps that it's like delicious. So, you know, this was our first Best in Show, and we're still leveraging this one pretty hard. So you wanna taste the cheese?
All right. Cabot Clothbound. I had a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, is my camera on? Because I was like, nom, 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 nom. Really enjoying this particular wedge and really going after it.
All of us are jealous about the size of the piece that you have in your hand. It's outstanding.
It's like my own personal cheese board here. So this particular wedge of Clothbound is roasted chicken, and mine was made on June 11th of last year, so about 10 months old. Roasted chicken dripping, like pan drippings, tinned pineapple, juicy, bright sweetness, toasted almonds. It really hits all over the palate. Really quickly, I'm just gonna, I know we're sort of running out of time here, but we have the 4 different profiles of, I'm sorry, my video is gonna be on while we look at this, but here we go. Actually, no, I can do that. Here we go. There we go. So we have identified 4 different flavor profiles of Cabot Clothbound. The one that I'm eating right now is definitely chicken broth and juicy, but basically we have a sensory team who just tastes batches of cheese all day long. Every batch of cheese that we sell gets tasted multiple times and graded. Usually the gradings are pretty quick. flavor, texture, appearance, aroma, salt. And then we have something called the deliciousness factor, the DF. The deliciousness factor is like, what would a cheesemonger at Antonelli's think of this cheese? Would they pick up another wedge after they sold it to a customer and do it again? Would they maybe move on to the next cheese and it would be a neutral experience? Or is it a batch of cheese that they're not going to reach for again because it just wasn't putting our best foot forward? And we do everything we can to divert the lower DF scores into something like a shredded cheese program, and then really highlight batches that are gonna have that customer coming back asking for that cheese again. So we've really done a deep dive into cloth found, and once we identify better batches, then we'll do this deep sensory analysis where we have created what's called a spider graph, which is just a way of visualizing a sensory score of the cheese. And through statistical analysis, we were lucky enough to have a young French woman who just graduated from dairy school with us for a few years. And she looked at the data and found recurring personality types of this cheese based on many, many batches that were graded along the same score. So you can see 0 in the center, 10 towards the outside of the graph. So each attribute that you see around the circle is scored. So you can score the same cheese over and over and over and then see a shape for a very specific batch. So what we're looking at now is the average shape of a personality type. So my batch that I just took many little bites of, big chicken broth score, big fruity, particularly pineapple score. Little bit milky, but that milkiness has really evolved and matured into a more depth of flavor, those meaty flavors. Salt, right about perfect. Umami, my umami score was higher than the classic profile for chicken broth and juicy. Mine was particularly savory. That umami is like the soy sauce savory thing. Sweetness caramely, my piece had a higher sweet score than this shows. It's maybe even getting into the umami caramelized flavor profile. The texture goes between short, meaning very crumbly, and long, meaning kind of bendy. And so this was right in the middle. It was crumbly at first, but very creamy on the palate. Moderate to low acidity, not not too lemony and mouth puckering. It was just enough brightness to really bring out the other attributes, and no bitterness. That's definitely this particular profile that I have, almost no bitterness registering. So it's like the perfect Big Mac flavor, right? It's sweet, salty, umami, and bright.
The wheel that we're tasting is outstanding. It's over on the right side of the screen, more so in the yolky and bright or butter and toast, but it is tasting outstanding right now. And we're pairing it with a apple cider jelly from Vermont. So it's
awesome.
Amazing terroir happening.
Cool. So we've got one more cheese to taste, and that's the Bailey Hazen Blue, which is probably, people ask me what my favorite cheese that we make is, and it's like asking what your favorite kid is, but every now and then, you've got a cheese that's just like stand out, and it changes from day to day and week to week and season to season because cheese is so complicated. And raw milk cheese is you're actually driving a farm system to produce a milk that you represent in the form of a cheese. It's like connected to a farming system, and there's so many things that need to go right to make Bailey Hazen Blue. It really is the most complicated cheese that we make, and we've started doing some. Cheese is not an invention. Cheese is a discovery. We kind of back into our understanding of what a cheese is and how it works. And we're getting to know this cheese. It's been on, oh boy, the best run of deliciousness because the other part of our sensory program is really about measuring deliciousness. So there's 3 types of cheese: cheese that builds sales, cheese that maintains sales, and cheese that kills sales. And it's basically, our approach has been to develop a way of forecasting velocity of sales by measuring deliciousness. And Bailey has been on quite a run. So this is a raw milk cheese we started making in 2003, right at the beginning. Our understanding of the cheese has really evolved over that time, and we're still learning a lot about how to make this cheese delicious. And we're messing around with the idea of cheese, in that we've started producing versions and batches of Bailey, and they're going to be available coming right up at Antonelli's and on our website, that are completely wild cheeses. So cheeses made with cultures that we develop by concentrating, as in allowing our milk to ferment naturally, and then feeding it the way you would feed a sourdough starter over the course of about 10 days to really concentrate lactic acid bacteria that's indigenous to our milk supply and our farming system. And then the blue mold spores, we've been working with Elmore Mountain Bakery, which is our local bakery here. They're honestly, the Jasper Hill of artisan bread in our area. They're cutting edge technology on the baking side, wood-fired ovens. Computerized wood-fired ovens. They're amazing people and doing amazing work. And we partnered with our neighbor who's growing rye and producing rye whiskey to bake these loaves, these heavy loaves of rye bread over fired that we then pierce and ripen the way you would ripen a cheese, in order to capture indigenous microflora and Penicillium roqueforti, which colonize the inside of these loaves. It's a totally traditional French technique from the Roquefort region. And we've been doing that for a couple of years and figuring out the logistics. And we've made a couple of batches that are going out into the market, and they are really interesting because they really typify what in the purest form, what it is that we're doing. That's a little bit. So look for it. It's called Native Bailey, and you'll be able to find it at Antonelli's. So let's taste this cheese. So do you want to get into it?
You didn't mention that it won best unpasteurized cheese in the world a few years ago.
Oh yeah, it's pretty
You
good.
kind of grazed over how amazing this cheese is, and you forgot to mention.
Yeah, it's I think of it as like a gateway blue, because we're in a region where nobody eats anything but cheddar. You know what I mean? It's just cheddar. That's we're in Cabot country, and we have switched on consumers one by one in our neighborhood, and there are a lot of people that really don't like blue cheese that love this cheese, because it's the first kind of encounter with a blue cheese that didn't either taste like puke, or have that aggressive metallic kind of edge that Danish blues have. So yeah, it's the gateway blue, the bacon of blue cheese.
And for those of you that are tasting this right now already, I find that this cheese it brings to the forefront the kind of the flavors of the farm, as if you were standing in the middle of the farm, taking a big deep breath in. This cheese actually showcases that aroma and that smell and that flavor so well. It's just amazing. I feel like I'm standing near the barn when I have a bite of this. It's like the essence of the farm. It's incredible.
Yeah, texture just melts in your mouth. It's like chocolate.
Fudgy texture, right? Yeah, chocolatey flavor, fudgy texture. I like how much white space is in the cheese. As somebody who works on marketing projects, I appreciate white space anyway, but in a blue cheese, the white is just a really nice balance. You get the cheesy, toasted butter flavors on that part of the cheese, and then when you get a little bit of the blue, you get the maybe anise, fennel-y, licoricey spice notes, but again, it's subtle. This was my first blue cheese that I didn't have to fake a smile while tasting with a customer. I grew up in the Midwest without blue cheese, and I just wasn't quite there with it yet, and this was my gateway blue, where I was like, yeah, not only can I eat this, but I think I like it. I think I want another bite. So this is, so what is the blue in this cheese? The blue is a flora. It's called Penicillium roqueforti, and that's what Mateo was talking about with that loaf of rye bread. Rye is a really good vector for growing Penicillium roqueforti. So by piercing that loaf of bread in the vault, we were able to find 7 different strains of this blue flora that were just in our atmosphere that we're using for that native Bailey. And over time, we'll be incorporating those native cultures more and more into regular Bailey. But it is, it's a blue mold, so it's in the same family as the fluffy white mold that grows on a bloomy rind cheese. So it's like an inside-out surface ripened cheese where we're growing the surface flora on the inside. And to get that flora to grow inside the cheese, we have to spike the wheels with a stainless steel spike to let air inside. So first you have to make a cheese with big air pockets, just like you'd be an expert baker and make the crumb of a bread exactly the way you want it. You have to make the curd of a cheese exactly the way that you want it, and then you spike it with stainless steel spikes. Mateo's showing the little dimples on the outside of the cheese where it was spiked, and on your wedge you might even see, if you've still got a piece, the vein. It looks like we've injected it with blue, but we've really just made air holes to get oxygen into those pockets of space in the curd where that would give the room for the blue mold to grow. So it's a fungi. Fungus are among us. Real talk. Flora. Flora is a more marketable term than fungi, right? All right. So at the very last slide here, I'm going to share my screen and let Mateo kind of take it away. This has been really fun. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this, Antonelli's. I'm going to figure out how to.
I want to tell my Mateo story. I never got to say how Mateo influenced my career too. In 2010, the American Cheese Society conference was in Seattle, and this was before I had friends in the cheese world. I was just a volunteer, and it was the opening night reception, and Kendall had to stay back to run the shop because that's just how it was. And I didn't have any friends yet. I knew Zoe. I knew like 2 other people in the industry, and it was the opening night reception, and it was clearing out. And it's important that you actually socialize. It's very much, I mean, the American Cheese Society is mostly just socializing, but I didn't have anything to do that night. I didn't have dinner plans. I didn't know where I was going. And so I watched this group of people. It was clear, it was like the last like 15 people, and there was one person I knew in that group. So I just kind of jumped onto their group and started walking with them. And it turned out that it was a birthday party for Andy Hatch, who makes Pleasant Ridge Reserve, which if you've had it before, it's just an amazing cheese. And I was this nobody in the industry with, and I ended up sitting next to Mateo that night at dinner, taking shots, well, we'll just say celebrating Andy's birthday. And it was that night sitting between Mateo and Steve Jones from the cheese bar in Portland that pushed me into getting involved more in the industry. It was an amazing night, but because of Mateo, I ended up pushing harder and harder into the American Cheese Society and eventually getting on the board and stuff. So pretty amazing night of my life. So I'm grateful for that, Mateo. That was
thanks,
a
man.
fun party.
Yeah. And thanks for doing what you do for the industry. I'm not sure if you all know like what John's role has been at the American Cheese Society, but you know, he's contributed hugely to like helping support programs that help support a lot of cheesemakers and retailers. And you know, I don't know, I feel pretty privileged to be a part of it all.
Oh man, thank you.
So we've got like one last slide show, which is part of a presentation that I've been working on for a while, and it's really kind of a summary of how we think about what we're doing, which is, we're a mission-based business, and we're trying to figure out how to measure impact. And one of the ways that we do that is by just looking at, the waves of cash that flow in and then mostly out of our business. We're a pretty low margin business. Our total sales over our lifetime, we haven't really updated the numbers, through 2019 here. So our lifetime expenses are really like the sum of all the money that we've spent since we started this business. And when we started tracking this a few years ago, it was shocking when we started measuring, the flows of cash that we could steer in an intentional way, in one way or another. And so through the end of 2019, we've spent $147 million have flowed, in and out of our company. And, when we started, my brother Andy does this every January now. He sorts all of our expenses by zip code. And 79% of those dollars were spent in Vermont. But the part that we're most excited and interesting in is what gets spent in our community, which is really a 15-mile radius of where we are. And that's a shocking number. There's a lot of other businesses that are being developed around us. Our money is trickling through the community in all kinds of different ways. And, the more we're able to direct the flow of those dollars in our community, the more viable it is to live here, the more viable it is to, the idea of keeping our school alive, where there's, this widening of Vermont and this brain drain that's been happening. And our business is attracting young, bright professionals and employing all kinds of local people that are working on farms and making cheese in our community. And it's really, the dollars that are flowing in and have, our customers who have been able to support and participate in the renewal of our town and civic life and cultural life here is good. And we're one business that's part of a network of artisan producers, including Elmore Mountain and vegetable producers, High Mowing Seeds, right down the road from us. And that incredibly dynamic food system that we're a part of really is so fragile in the face of some of the challenges that we're all facing as part of this COVID thing. It is pretty intense. We experienced a 50% drop in sales of cheese going out the door over the past month. It has been crazy. And so we're responding. We are shrinking as a company, and it's the first time that we've experienced anything like that. There's 104 of us in the business, and we're trying to figure out how to keep our people and the team that we've built here intact, because that really is the core of the work and the mission of our business, and it's all supported by cheese. So I just wanted to appreciate you all for tuning in and supporting Antonelli's, because we need our customers to be able to survive this in order to survive as a business. And you guys are the best. really thank you for putting your money into the kind of experience that you're having tonight. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to participate. Thanks.
And I joined the Clean Plate Club tonight, naturally. The flavors were outstanding. I know you guys work hard to create a product that showcases the farm and showcases the hard work that goes into it, and the animals and the milk. Everything was tasting outstanding. That last slide is incredibly inspiring. I'm not sure. I've already taken a picture of it. Not that I know how to get it on Facebook and post it and all that stuff, but my team will certainly see it, because I think what you guys bring to this industry is that commitment to community. Not everybody thinks that way. Not everybody thinks about profit for good, to serve your community. And you guys put community first, and that's just an inspiring message, and everything tasted amazing. I think you all need to go celebrate with a few more beers tonight. This was, yeah, exactly. This was more than I could have met. I'm like a cheese geek. I've been drinking and eating the whole time. I feel outstanding right now. And so thanks for being a part of this, though. And Mateo, this was incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is really fun. Can everyone turn on their camera really quick just at the end here? I want to see who's like on the other side here. Any of you feeling?
I should be able to allow it.
Will it break?
There we go. There we go. And you're going to have to scroll around. So there's.
Woo!
Yeah, awesome. You can unmute and it could just be chaos if you want. Let me see if I can do that. I'm not sure that I know how to do that. That seems.
Thank you.
So if you want to, you can, but y'all were amazing.
Thank you, guys.
It's amazing.
Have a good night.
Thank you guys. It was so awesome. It was so
Thank
awesome.
you so much.
Like, we will tune in next time, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great tasting.
Bye,
Much.
y'all. Thank you.
This is like
You guys were awesome.
This is you guys.